Have you ever had a rough day of Valorant? Some days, it just feels like you can't get a single kill. It could be that your aim feels off, you don't feel comfortable with how you're playing, or you feel frustrated because of your teammates, or the enemy just seeming to have a smurf. Well, trust me, we've all been there, and let me just tell you in more ways than one. But what's important during these off games is identifying exactly what it was that felt off. In most scenarios, we found that there's one big mistake that players start to make that ends up costly for the entire match. And if the mistake is never corrected, this could affect gameplay for multiple games on end. And that mistake we call being at the wrong place at the wrong time. Positioning is a massive part of Valorant. If we compared how pros move and position themselves versus low-ranked players, we'd see that the pros are much more detailed and precise. This meaning that they make every step count and ensure they never overextend or put themselves in situations where they'd get swarmed by enemies. Low-ranked players tend to move just a little bit too much, thus resulting in them being overexposed and punished as a result. In this video, we're going to be showing you how the mistake is presented in-game and how you can quickly fix it so that you can position yourself just like the pros do. To help us with that, we have a video from one of our very own viewers, Goofs, off our Discord server. Now, if you're itching for answers on how you can improve yourself, then make sure to join our Discord and check out the Ask a Pro channel. Here, all the SkillCapped.com subscribers can ask their lingering questions. And one of our high-ranked coaches will then reach out and provide top-notch advice regarding your query. And on that note, if you truly want to become the best Valorant player possible, SkillCapped is definitely the place for you. On our website, we have a large variety of detailed, comprehensive courses that'll help take your Valorant games to the next level. We're the only service on the market that actually breaks down real gameplay in our videos and shows players how to improve, so truthfully, we really can't be beat. And with that said, let's jump into today's content. The most common positional mistake we see players making is swinging into multiple players. To start things off, we're going to go through a very simple clip here. Goofs spots and hears multiple enemies coming through. In response, Goofs throws Paranoia and rushes in for the kill, but no kills were obtained. Let's pause here for a second. What went wrong with this play? At first glance, this seemed like a reasonable move to make. You know where the enemies are, and if we blind them with Paranoia, we should have some easy frags. The problem that ensues is that the Paranoia was thrown way too late. Fade was already well past the range of the flash, and there were multiple players already closing the distance on Goofs. Even if the Paranoia was thrown earlier though, against so many players, it's very likely Goofs was going to die with this flash and swing. So how can we fix this play? For starters, let's think about survivability. If we peek A main and see several players there, the worst idea is to let them rush you and swing out. It doesn't matter how good your utility and weaponry is, they have strength in numbers. So at the start of this round, the best play is to perform short peeks and gather intel. Now, if multiple enemies are spotted in those peeks, you can take a few brief shots at them in the moment, and from there, you want to get the heck out of there. Enemies are going to be coming in hot, and with this A main position, there isn't much of an escape option for Goofs if he stays here. So, take a few shots and back out. And now that you're on site, you have a lot more security. The enemy's further away, and you can simply get out of trouble by falling back onto site after a short peek. This hallway is also perfect to throw Paranoia through. If you hear the enemy continuing their rush, set up the flash and go in before they get too close. Now the enemies will be blinded, and you'll be able to snag some easy frags before retreating to safety. It's important you don't just swing wide like a madman after Paranoia though. You have to consider the chance that somebody could have dodged the blind if they peeked out late or just narrowly avoided it. So peek out just enough to spot an enemy and go for the kill. From there, you can peek out gradually further and further to secure more frags that present themselves. But don't peek too long though that the Paranoia effect wears off. After a few kills and the blind about to fade, you can swing off A main. Now, if the enemy decides to continue to push, they'll really be in trouble. You'll have some extremely easy kills if they push out. And if they decide to wait out the smoke, your team should be well rotated over to help defend by the time they rush out. This is hands down the biggest positional mistake we see players making. You never want to rush into multiple players at once, especially if you don't have a method of getting away afterwards. Sure, in another world, the paranoia could have blinded everyone and you may have gotten a few kills. But the fact that there isn't a way to get out of this situation is what makes pushing out a poor choice. To ensure more kills and increase the chances of you living, it's better to run to a spot that's easier to peek in and out of. The narrower hallway to get onto site also helps ensure more players are blinded by your paranoia. With abilities considered, backing up is definitely the right move. Continuing on, let's get into our next clip. We have Goofs trying to smoke the A site for his team. In the midst of doing that, he gets shot in the back. This delays his rotation and he has to try to clear this player out before he can go help his team. Goofs starts off walking but eventually just decides to run in at the enemy Raze. Raze ends up winning out the duel with a Stinger versus a Vandal. This leads us to our next point. Like we mentioned earlier, pros are very precise about their movement. Comparatively, lower elo players tend to move too much, typically because of angst or just not knowing where to go. By running quickly toward the enemy, we put ourselves at a disadvantage for two reasons. One, we give up our location to the Raze. With that information, Raze can easily pre-position her crosshair and just await the peek. Raze has also been walking since she fired her initial bullet, so her exact location isn't really fully known. We already have a disadvantage here due to the intel, which brings us to our second point. Because we don't know where Raze is, we don't know when we should stop moving during this push. Not only are we constantly adjusting our crosshair as we move, but we'll also have to react quickly to stop moving when Raze appears so we can shoot. This extra time to react and the audio information is what gives Raze the upper hand in this duel despite having a worse weapon. So how could we have done this better? The first step is to not give away your location. Slowly walk your way towards where you think Raze is. Once you get close to her supposed location, you could strafe back and forth at potential angles she could be in. By gradually strafing back and forth, you avoid making noise while increasing the amount of distance you're covering. You're also stopping briefly between these peaks so that if Raze appears, you just have to focus on shooting. Now this is one step you get to skip, which allows you to react and fire shots faster than if you ran off the rip and had to reactively stop. Now, another option you may be thinking is to just stay back and wait for Raze to push out. Her teammates are on the opposite side, so she'll have to come out at some point, right? Well, not quite. Raze's job here is to slow down rotators. If her team is handling things well on site and she's holding you back from regrouping with your team, then she's done her job. All she has to do is sit back and hold an angle where she can see you rotating. The longer she keeps you away from retaking the site, the better. In this scenario, you're the one that needs to take initiative so that you can quickly take care of this meddling Raze and help your teammates out. But you need to do this methodically. Most players here will feel a sense of urgency and thus will run as a result. This gives too much information for the enemy to respond accordingly. Like the scene we saw, Raze had the upper hand in the dueling compartment knowing Goof's location. Now, she could have also decided to run away and make a cat and mouse chase out of the situation, and this would really allow her to stall for time. In individual duels like this, where each player is seeking the other, never be the one to start running and giving away your location first. Unless you're tight on time to defuse or plant the spike, you want to keep yourself hidden so that you have the surprise factor. Walking and strafing to slowly clear angles also allows you to minimize how much you have to adjust your crosshair. It avoids the scenario where you're running like crazy and the enemy's on an off angle that you have to flick towards. Okay, let's go into our third clip here. We have Goofs on the A site and also her teammate Sage playing above. The enemy teams start pushing out and Reyna throws out her blinds to initiate. Goofs goes for a peek and spray and ends up eliminated. Now let's pause here again. Think about what went wrong here and how we could have changed the situation. So, the positional lesson for this clip is working with your teammates. Where your teammates are located plays a big factor on where you should be positioned as well. This setup isn't all too bad at first glance, but the execution has to be perfect. Now, let's think about the enemy perspective first. Where would most people look at when they're pushing onto site? In most cases, this would be at the bottom of site. For that reason, the first person that should peek out first in this scenario is Sage that's on top of site. By doing so, the enemy has to flick their crosshair up to Sage, which will make it hard to land a shot. Briefly after Sage starts shooting is when Goofs should have peeked out. With everyone busy flicking over to Sage, Goofs can better move out and assist Sage in eliminating the enemy players. Now let's not forget about abilities. Looking back, we actually have a well-placed Cypher trip in front of A main. Along with that, Sage likely has her slows available too. And once we hear the push, the ideal order of moves is for Goofs to smoke A main, which he did do. Now if we continue to hear the enemy marching forward, a Sage slow would have been perfect to slow down the push further. This decreased mobility would have also made it easier to aim at the enemy. And now for the cherry on top of this Cypher trip. If Goofs and Sage waited for someone to step onto the tripwire, that would have revealed the enemy location, leading to an easy wallbang or peek. The enemy's crosshair would really be all over the place at that point. They'd have to flick over to the trip to break it, then flick up on the top side to challenge Sage, then flick back down to Goofs to successfully take the site. And let me tell you, with the setup Goofs team has here, if the cards are played right, there's no way they don't hold down the site. And with all that being said though, this ideal scenario will likely never play out the way you want it to. Unless you've practiced this strat with your team before, there's gonna be hiccups in the play, which is exactly what happened in this clip. The point here, though, is to try to make coordinated plays with your teammates. It doesn't have to be as sophisticated as we just laid out, but simply put, the first part of coordinating who peaks first will already make a massive difference in how you're able to hold sites. The more you and your team are positioned to help one another, the better. And last but not least, we have this clip here. There appears to be some action in A main in which Goofs joins in. A raised nade comes flying in and Goofs is chucked down to 26 HP. Now pause here. What would be the best move to make here? With this health, the chances of winning a fair duel, they're pretty slim unless you think the enemy's also on low HP. A long-range duel, rifle to rifle, not the best idea here. It's going to be harder to hit a headshot at this range. Meanwhile, the enemy just has to hit an easy body shot or a leg shot and you're done for. The ideal position to be in when you're in low health is in close quarters. Being in close proximity makes it easier for you to land a headshot to immediately wipe out a full health player. And we can also go a step further and play a surprise off angle. If the enemy doesn't expect it, they'll have to flick their crosshair over to you. This gives you even more time to shoot first and win the duel. There's a few courses of action that could be made in this specific scenario. We could smoke off A main and play inside our smoke. This adds a surprise factor while also allowing you to get into close quarters for easier headshots. We could also play behind the boxes outside site. This gives us a close off angle while also having a way to retreat away from the fight. Keep in mind though, you are exposed to drop and sand from here though, so make sure your back's covered if you choose this option. And a third option is to play in the middle corner of site. This position could catch players off guard who aren't immediately pushing onto the site. It also sets you up to make a similar coordinated play with your teammate on top side. Let Sage peek out first, and when they're distracted, you can then push and go for kills. With low health, this play gives you a couple extra milliseconds to hopefully help secure a frag or two before going down. The possibilities here are honestly endless, but the big takeaway here is to find a close, unsuspecting position to surprise the enemy. This gives you the best chance of fragging with the health available to you. That's all we have for today's video though. We hope it gave you guys a more in-depth perspective on how crucial positioning is in winning your duels and taking over games. Next time you're in similar situations to the ones we presented today, think about where you should be at the moment. If you're at the right place, at the right time, the chances of you coming out victorious are very high. As always, we here at SkillCapped want to thank you all for watching and we'll catch you in the next one.